We're to bore you to death today because we're going to talk about archaeology. Do y'all know what archaeology is by chance? Random chance? Yeah.
Like designing buildings?
The architect, it's really, really close though. Archaeology is pretty much, do y'all like to play in dirt?
Yeah.
Or did you at some point in time like to play in dirt? Well, that's pretty much what these guys go to town on. Archaeologists, all they do is pretty much play in dirt all day. They don't get paid for it, but they like doing it. So this is what these guys like doing. They like to play in dirt. Archaeology is a method for studying of past human cultures based on material evidence and artifacts and sites. Where we're at, the class that we're taking is called Archaeology of Palestine. And so we go to the Middle East and we go to Palestine. And in our archaeology class, we're studying kind of the land of the Bible, so to speak, and what that has to kind of talk about. In archaeology, what they do is we're going to take the way people used to live, and we're going to try to study it. For instance, way back when, before I was born, before you were born, before your parents were born, before their great-great-grandparents were born, probably before their great-great-grandparents were born, there's something called the hunter-gatherer phase. And all over the world, if y'all will look over here at this map, in the world, we kind of started off in this area in the very beginning of times around in here, and then we ended up moving over this way through the hunter-gatherers, and that's kind of through the Bering Strait. We ended up coming down through Alaska. Due to your history classes, you kind of know that. Well, in this hunter-gatherer phase that we used to be in, they didn't know how to farm. They didn't know how to cultivate. They didn't know how to grow corn and beans and mass-produce cows and stuff like that. They didn't know any of that. So what they had to do is they had to chase food. They had to chase buffaloes. Have y'all ever seen any of the old westerns with like Indians and stuff in them? And the Indians just kind of chase after the buffalo, or when the buffalo come through, they go and get their meat then. This is the same thing that people are doing hundreds and hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago actually. They ended up, they kind of, in this hunter-gatherer phase, they chased their food all the way through here and all the way up, and then they ended up coming to the United States, and that's how we got over here. Well, in the archaeology phase, well, there's kind of like a blur at the very beginning because we're in this hunter-gatherer phase. They don't really have buildings. They kind of just have like little huts that are just temporary living spaces that they live in. And so, to study the archaeology point of this time period, we don't really have a bunch. We don't really have a lot, but it's still there. We can still tell by the layering of the soils, which Ryan's going to talk about later. We're still going to talk about how they can kind of tell that phase was there. But as we get older and as society gets a little bit better, we turn into this more farm cultivating kind of thing. They start planting farms. They stop moving all over the place, and they start staying in one area. And they start having families, and we can go through a time like that. And so the first question I have up here is, why do you think archaeology is important? What's the point in knowing that people are going to travel through Asia and into North America and stuff like that? What's the point in digging down in the earth and studying soil, studying arrowheads and stuff like that we find in the dirt? What do you think the point is about something like that is? No clue. Just to give you a hint, why do you think we study history, like the Civil War and the American Revolution and stuff like that? Yeah.
For you to like know what people did back then, so you can probably kind of add to it and make it more modern, like today.
Exactly. Okay. Anytime that you all are, let's say you're going to write a paper, right? And you write your paper, and you go through and you know it's not great the first draft, right? You're going to have to go through and proofread. You're going to have to fix your commas and your misspellings and stuff like that. It's not going to be perfect the first time. So you go back and you revise it. Well, then you look at it again and you revise it again, and you just keep revising it. This is the same thought process with us going back and studying what happened in the American Revolution, what happened in the Civil War and stuff like that. Looking back at our past so that we can understand that, so we can cherish it, so we can love our tradition, and also so that we can grow and build from that. We don't want to make the same mistakes that they made in the Civil War. We don't want to make the same mistakes they made in the American Revolution. So we got to be able to grow from that. Studying archaeology, It's the same stuff from that. We've got to learn from our past so we cannot kind of make mistakes for our future. The next thing is an archaeologist. An archaeologist is a scientist who seeks to understand the past human cultures by carefully studying the artifacts and other evidence from the archaeological sites. So, pretty much in archaeology, you have archaeologists. And these are the people who do the archaeology. I want to talk to you just for a second about kind of the occupation of archaeology, kind of how they get their job, why they like doing it, stuff like that. Pretty much, if you're an archaeologist, it's pretty much not going to be a full-time job. Don Garner, who teaches our class that me and Ryan are in, he takes a lot of trips to Palestine. And when he goes to Palestine, he studies, you know, the old ancient places like Gezer and stuff like that. Well, he only does it during the summer. During the fall and the spring, he's teaching us classes. So to be an archaeologist, it's kind of just like, you all like playing basketball, you like playing video games, you all like doing other activities outside of school. And you're really passionate about those things, right? Even cheerleading. We love doing, you know, the extracurricular activities. We love playing video games, right? We love watching TV, even though, you know, we love doing stuff like that. For archaeologists, this is the same thing. They love going to the Middle East or wherever it is and digging in the dirt. And so it's kind of, when you're a kid, you like playing in the mud, and then your mom gets mad at you. Well, now these are like 30 and 40 and 50-year-old men who play in the mud, and nobody yells at them. So it's pretty cool. So that's a little bit about archaeologists. Other than that, I can't really. It's more of a passion thing. It's not. I've talked about that. They don't. Most of the sites, I'll tell you this. To be an archaeologist, most of the stuff you don't really get paid for. Like our professor, Don Garner, when he goes to the Middle East and when they start digging and going through the soils and stuff, and when they find old pottery or old, you know, bones and stuff like that, when they find that stuff, most of the time it goes to a museum after that. And it's not like the museum's paying anything for that. Most of the time it's them paying to dig at a site, and then they just give whatever they find to a museum. So it's not something that they do for money at all. It's something that they do because they love it. And most of them have other jobs other than just be archaeologists. As far as the artifacts go, this is probably one of the most important things that we have in archaeology, because through the layering of the soils, which Ryan will talk about here in a second, the pottery and the artifacts that they find is how they date everything. It's how they date what time period they're in. I'll tell you all the time periods that we kind of, there's more than this, but this is kind of what we just go with. The pottery dating system that we're going to use, it's kind of divided up into the earliest being the early Bronze Age, which is 3200 BC to 2200 BC. The Middle Bronze Age, which is 2200 BC to 1550 BC. And the Late Bronze Age, from 1550 to 1200 BC. So when we're talking about pottery, when we're talking about the artifacts that we find, pretty much the farther down you dig, the older something's going to be. Does that make sense? The farther down that we're going to dig, the older something is. And when we find these artifacts, let's say we dig 20 feet below the earth. Let's say that happens to be the early Bronze Age. So we know that as we've dug 20 feet below, that's the early Bronze Age. Well, let's go up from there, and then we can go to the Middle Bronze Age. We know 10 feet below is going to be the Middle Bronze Age. Now, this isn't real. If you go outside in your yard and dig 20 feet below the ground, I don't know that that's the early Bronze Age. But that's just kind of give you some idea of what they're doing, how they do it, and just the perspective about that. The artifacts are collected from dig sites all around the world. The class that we're in, we're mostly staying in this area, right around in here. But as one of your teachers told us earlier, he went to UT, and they were talking about, there's one of his professors does archaeology all in the southeast. Like, this is everywhere. We're all the time trying to figure out where we came from, our past, our past experiences. Archaeology is anywhere and everywhere. In the gray fossil site, that's archaeology. Now they're digging up bones, and so that's kind of paleontology, but it's still the archaeological digs that they're doing. And what kind of information can you get from items collected from archaeology archaeological dig sites. So what do you think if we just went outside, got a shovel and a mattock, and let's say somebody was really generous and donated us a backhoe, what do you think we're going to find in the ground?
Dirt.
We'll find a lot of dirt, right? What else do you think we'll find? You said rocks? Yeah.
Maybe pottery.
We'll find some pottery probably. What else do you find? What do you find sometimes in your cow fields and stuff? Y'all not find? Do you find arrowheads ever?
Yeah.
Stuff like that. What else might you find? Have y'all ever found like old tools or anything? You found some old tools? These are just some of the artifacts that we're going to find as we dig. And each and every artifact that we find, it tells us a whole lot about the culture. Like if we find an arrowhead, well, we know that's probably from the hunter-gatherer phase, or maybe this was like a war tribe of wherever we're at. Or if we find tools, well, maybe this is going to be more of a community kind of tribe or whatever we happen to be dealing with. The sites and artifacts that we find can be messengers from the past. If we know how to read their messages, then they can tell us about the people who made and used them and left them behind. Although the owners of the artifacts and the inhabitants of the sites may have lived for hundreds or even thousands of years ago, they undoubtedly have had many of the same needs and concerns, hopes and fears, joys and sorrows that we have today. So let's go back to our hunter-gatherer people. They know they have to have food, right? Do you all know you have to eat, right? Okay, and where do you all eat at? You eat breakfast. Y'all eat breakfast in the morning, Pop-Tart, cereal bar, something like that. And then where do you eat for lunch? Cafeteria. If you're at home, you'll eat a sandwich or something, and then you have dinner. And who buys your dinner and stuff? Your parents do. The same things are going along. The same things that are happening now are happening thousands of years ago. Kids are still having to rely on their parents to go get them food. That's why the hunter-gatherer thing was kind of there. The families traveled with the hunters, and so they just kind of went along with them. And as we look and as we see the artifacts, everything is kind of up for our own interpretation. And this is what I love about archaeology, is we have people who have PhDs. They've been in school for 10, 15 years. They've been on practical sites doing this stuff. They have a lot of knowledge up here, right? They've studied their books. They know everything that's in their books. They know all the time periods. They know everything about the time period. But when it comes to picking out these spots, when it comes to our professor Don, when he goes to the Middle East and he goes down and he sits down and he sees all of Jerusalem, and he's like, where are we going to pick a archaeology site at? It's pretty much just a guess. Like in math, when you're doing guess and check, you just guess if this is right. If it's right, you keep going with it. If it's wrong, you just throw something else in there and just keep going with it. This is the same kind of stuff, and this is why archaeology is so hard, is because this is the same kind of stuff that they're having to do in dirt. They're just having to guess. Well, let's see, just to give you an example, the site that our professor's at right now, it has a wall outside of it. They looked at the little desert or whatever, and there's this old remains of a wall. Well, I wonder what that is. It's a guess, but this might have something in it. So then they look at the wall, and they look at the very entrance of it. Well, there's all this ashy debris and stuff like that, and there's all kind of this fortified stuff up against the very entrance of the wall. Well, that can tell us something. Maybe there was guards at the wall, or maybe this was a big marketplace, and all the people were sitting next to the wall to sell their goods and trade. It's all a guess. And so when we guessed that it was that big fortified wall, we guessed that maybe up near the entrance is where we need to dig. And when they start digging, they just hope they find something. And so as you push on, and as we look at it, and as we look at the whole vast land, the vast countryside everywhere, and we've kind of educated our guesses to maybe this is where we think it's going to be at, and we don't find anything, it's not a disappointment, but that's part of archaeology. That's part of what we're doing. It's just a guess. We hope we get it right, but it might not be. We might not find anything. And that's what I think is so cool about archaeology, and the kind of the thing that they're so smart, and they have so many more years in school than I do, and yet